the silent watchers. The vast emptiness of space held secrets that most civilizations would never discover. Among the countless stars and swirling galaxies, there existed a species that had mastered the art of observation. They called themselves the Kale Dominion, and for over 3,000 years, they had watched the rise and fall of countless worlds. Their technology was beyond comprehension, their knowledge vast and their patience endless. They had seen empires crumble, witnessed species evolve, and observed the birth of new civilizations across the cosmos. But nothing had prepared them for what they were about to discover about a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Commander Thane stood in the observation chamber of the massive surveillance vessel that had been monitoring Earth for the past 2 centuries. His crystalline skin reflected the soft glow of holographic displays that surrounded him, each screen showing different aspects of human civilization. The Kale had always believed that younger species needed guidance, protection from themselves and from the dangers that lurked in the darkness between stars. Earth had been classified as a primitive world, interesting but ultimately insignificant in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Thane had reviewed the initial reports countless times, and everything pointed to the same conclusion. Humans were aggressive, divided, and technologically inferior. They posed no threat to anyone but themselves. The monitoring station had detected unusual energy signatures coming from Earth's solar system 3 weeks ago. At first, the science team dismissed them as natural phenomena, perhaps solar flares or cosmic radiation affecting their instruments. But the patterns persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. Senior analyst Vera had been the first to notice the anomaly. She had spent decades studying human behavior, watching as they fought wars over resources, borders, and ideologies. Her reports had always painted them as a fractured species, incapable of unity or significant technological advancement. Yet something about these new readings troubled her deeply. Thane approached Vera's station where multiple screens displayed complex data streams. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the Kale database, and that fact alone was concerning. The Dominion had encountered thousands of species, catalogued millions of technologies, and these readings matched none of them. Vera looked up at her commander, her expression grave. She explained that the signatures were appearing simultaneously across Earth's solar system, in locations that seemed random but somehow coordinated. The pattern suggested a level of organization and technological sophistication that contradicted every assessment the Kale had made about humanity. The Council of Observers convened immediately. The Grand Chamber aboard the surveillance vessel could accommodate the 100 senior members of the Kale expedition. They gathered in a semicircle, their forms shimmering in various shades of blue and silver. High Counselor Merrick presided over the assembly, his ancient features showing the weight of countless decisions made over centuries of service. The evidence was presented methodically, each data point analyzed and debated. The energy signatures were real, they were artificial, and they were undeniably human in origin. The question that hung in the air was simple yet profound. How had a species they considered primitive developed technology that their own sensors couldn't fully identify? Merrick ordered a deeper investigation. Stealth probes were deployed, their cloaking technology making them invisible to all known detection methods. These probes had successfully infiltrated hundreds of civilizations without ever being discovered. They approached Earth's solar system with a confidence born of technological superiority. The Kale expected to find perhaps a few experimental satellites or some rudimentary defense platforms. What they discovered instead would shake the foundation of everything they believed about humanity. The probes transmitted their findings, and the observation chamber fell into stunned silence. Hidden within the asteroid belt, camouflaged among the natural debris of the solar system, humanity had built a network of stations unlike anything the Kale had ever seen. These weren't simple outposts or mining facilities. They were massive military installations, each one capable of housing thousands of personnel and equipped with weapons systems that made the Kale analysts pause in disbelief. The stations were connected by what appeared to be quantum communication arrays, allowing instantaneous coordination across vast distances. But more shocking was what the probes found on Earth's moon Mars, and even in the depths of the gas giants' orbits. Humanity had been building a defense network in complete secrecy, and they had done it right under the Kale's observation. Thane studied the tactical displays with growing concern. The human vessels hidden among the asteroids were sleek and purpose-built, bearing no resemblance to the clumsy chemical rockets that humanity supposedly relied upon. These ships utilized propulsion systems that the Kale recognized as variations of their own technology, somehow developed independently by a species they had written off as backward. The weapons mounted on these vessels ranged from conventional kinetic accelerators to what appeared to be directed energy weapons and even more exotic systems that the probes couldn't fully analyze. It was as if humanity had leapfrogged centuries of normal technological development in the span of a few decades. The revelation sparked intense debate among the Kale leadership. Some argued that they must have missed something in their observations, that perhaps another advanced species had interfered with human development. Others suggested that humanity had discovered ancient technology left behind by a previous civilization. But Vera proposed a theory that troubled everyone more deeply. She believed that humans had been aware of the Kale surveillance all along and had deliberately shown them only what they wanted the observers to see. The implications were staggering. If humanity had detected the Kale's supposedly undetectable surveillance network, what else were they capable of? High Counselor Merrick made a decision that would change everything. The Kale Dominion would initiate first contact with humanity, not as benevolent guides to a primitive species, but as equals meeting for the first time. However, a faction within the Council disagreed strongly with this approach. Led by War Master Draven, they argued that humanity's deception represented a potential threat that needed to be neutralized immediately. Draven's military background shaped his worldview, and he had never trusted species that developed weapons before wisdom. He proposed a show of force, a demonstration of Kale superiority that would put humanity in its proper place within the galactic hierarchy. The Council was divided, and in their division they made a fatal error. They delayed their decision, choosing to gather more information before committing to a course of action. This hesitation gave humanity the time they needed. The Human Defense Network had indeed detected the Kale probes despite their advanced cloaking technology. Earth's scientists had been tracking the surveillance vessel for months, analyzing its capabilities and preparing for the moment when their watchers would finally reveal themselves. In command centers hidden beneath mountains and deep within oceanic trenches, human military leaders activated contingency plans that had been decades in the making. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the primary operations center located beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, hundreds of personnel worked at their stations, coordinating the response that would soon unfold. She had dedicated her entire career to this moment, preparing humanity for a threat that most people didn't even know existed. The politicians and the public believed that the massive infrastructure projects, the secretive research programs, and the mysterious budget allocations were for terrestrial purposes. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Humanity had discovered they weren't alone in the universe years ago, and they had been preparing for the day when their cosmic neighbors would come calling. The detection systems that Earth had developed were based on principles that the Kale wouldn't have thought possible for such a young civilization. Human scientists had approached the problem from a completely different angle, using quantum mechanics and theoretical physics in ways that more established civilizations had never considered. It was the advantage of being new to the galactic stage. Humans had no preconceptions about what was possible or impossible. They experimented, failed, learned, and tried again with a persistence that bordered on obsession. This approach had yielded technologies that, while perhaps less refined than Kale equivalents, were effective enough to level the playing field. Chen received confirmation that all defense platforms were online and ready. The network extended from Earth orbit to the outer reaches of the solar system, a web of detection grids, weapon platforms, and communication relays that could coordinate a unified response to any threat. But more importantly, humanity had developed something that would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. They had learned to think like their potential adversaries, to anticipate strategies and tactics, to prepare for scenarios that seemed unlikely but possible. The military academies had trained officers to fight enemies with superior technology, to use creativity and unconventional thinking to overcome disadvantages. Humanity had turned their perceived weakness into a strength. The Kale surveillance vessel suddenly detected a change in the energy signatures they had been monitoring. The Human Defense Network was no longer hiding. Every platform, every ship, every weapons system lit up simultaneously, their power signatures blazing across the Kale sensors like a challenge written in fire. In the observation chamber, alarms sounded for the first time in the vessel's long history. The displays showed something that no Kale had ever expected to see. Humanity was targeting them with weapons that shouldn't exist, using detection methods that couldn't possibly work, and doing it all with a precision that suggested they knew exactly where the cloaked surveillance vessel was positioned. Commander Thane realized in that moment that everything the Kale thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The fractured civilization they had observed was a facade. The primitive technology they had documented was deliberately misleading. The aggressive tendencies they had noted were not a weakness but a warning. Humanity had been ready all along, waiting and watching their watchers, preparing for the day when the Kale would reveal themselves. The question now was not whether humanity could defend themselves. The question was whether the Kale Dominion was prepared for what humanity would do next. In the vast silence of space, two civilizations stood on the brink of an encounter that would reshape their understanding of each other and themselves. The awakening. The moment of recognition changed everything. Aboard the Kale surveillance vessel, chaos erupted as systems that had operated flawlessly for centuries suddenly found themselves outmatched by human ingenuity. Commander Thane watched in disbelief as his tactical displays lit up with warnings and alerts. The humans were broadcasting a message on multiple frequencies, using languages and communication protocols that the Kale had never shared with them. It was a formal diplomatic greeting, but underneath the polite words lay an unmistakable message. Humanity knew the Kale were there, had known for quite some time, and they were ready for whatever came next. The transmission ended with coordinates for a meeting point in neutral space, along with a time frame for response. The confidence in that message shook Thane to his core. High Counselor Merrick immediately ordered the vessel to withdraw to a safer distance while the Council debated their response. War Master Draven argued forcefully for a military solution, insisting that humanity's deception and apparent technological advancement represented an unacceptable threat to Kale interests. He pointed to the weapon systems now clearly visible across Earth's solar system, noting that some of them appeared capable of striking targets at ranges that even Kale vessels would find challenging. Other council members urged caution, reminding everyone that they still didn't fully understand the extent of human capabilities. Senior Analyst Vera voiced what many were thinking but few wanted to admit. They had fundamentally misunderstood humanity from the very beginning. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction before refocusing on the enormous task ahead. The revelation had gone exactly as planned, but this was merely the opening move in a much larger game. She activated secure communications with leaders around the globe, confirming that all nations were maintaining the unified front they had carefully constructed over the past decade. The Secretary-General of the United Earth Defense Council appeared on her screen, his expression grave but determined. They discussed the next steps, knowing that everything humanity had built, everything they had sacrificed and hidden, would be tested in the hours and days to come. The fate of their species hung in the balance. Across Earth's solar system, human personnel manning the hidden installations watched their sensors carefully. These men and women had trained for years in absolute secrecy, running drills and simulations for a first-contact scenario that most of humanity didn't even know was possible. They came from every nation, every culture, united by a common purpose. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb sat at his station aboard Defense Platform Sentinel-7, positioned in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. His crew of 40 specialists monitored their section of the detection grid, ready to respond to any threat. Webb had joined the Secret Defense Force 8 years ago, leaving behind a promising career in civilian aerospace engineering. He had never regretted that decision, even during the long months of isolation and endless training. The Kale vessel's withdrawal had been detected immediately. Human tracking systems followed its movement with ease, a fact that surely wasn't lost on the observers. Webb and his crew watched as additional Kale vessels began appearing on long-range sensors, emerging from jump points at the edge of the solar system. The surveillance vessel was calling for reinforcements, and humanity's leadership had anticipated this response. The defense network shifted into a higher state of readiness, but no weapons were armed. Admiral Chen had been clear in her instructions. Humanity would demonstrate strength through preparedness, not aggression. They would show the Kale that Earth was defended, but they would not fire the first shot. The galaxy would see humans as a species ready to protect themselves, not as warmongers eager for conflict. In the Kale command vessel that had just arrived, Fleet Commander Zephyr reviewed the intelligence reports with growing amazement. She had been pulled from patrol duty in a distant sector and ordered to Earth's solar system with a battle group of 20 warships. The briefing she received during the journey had seemed almost fantastical, describing impossible human achievements and technology that defied established scientific principles. Now, seeing the data for herself, Zephyr understood why the Council had reacted with such alarm. The humans hadn't just developed defensive capabilities. They had created an integrated defense network that in some ways surpassed even Kale military installations. The efficiency of their coordination, the redundancy of their systems, and the clever positioning of their assets showed a level of strategic thinking that took most species centuries to develop. Zephyr opened a direct communication channel with High Counselor Merrick aboard the surveillance vessel. She had known Merrick for over a century, and she could hear the uncertainty in his voice as he explained the situation. The council was deadlocked on how to proceed. War Master Draven continued to push for a show of force, arguing that allowing this perceived challenge to go unanswered would encourage other younger species to defy Kale authority. But Marek and others recognized that military action against humanity would be costly at best and potentially disastrous at worst. The humans had clearly prepared for conflict, and their defensive positioning gave them significant advantages. Zephyr listened carefully, then offered her own assessment. She recommended accepting the human invitation for dialogue, but from a position of strength. The Kale battle group would maintain a visible presence while diplomatic channels were opened. The meeting point humanity had suggested was in the space between Earth and Mars, far enough from both planets to be neutral territory but close enough to Earth's defenses that the Kale would understand the implicit message. Admiral Chin herself would lead the human delegation, accompanied by representatives from Earth's major governments and scientific institutions. The decision to have Chin, a military commander, lead the diplomatic mission was deliberate. It sent a clear signal that humanity understood the potential for conflict and was prepared to manage it. But the inclusion of scientists and civilian leaders demonstrated that humans sought peaceful coexistence if possible. The delegation departed from Earth aboard the newly revealed diplomatic vessel Unity, a ship that combined elements of human aesthetics with technology that made even experienced Kale engineers take notice. As Unity made its way toward the designated meeting point, the Kale prepared their own delegation. High Counselor Marek would lead their representatives, supported by Senior Analyst Vera, Fleet Commander Zephyr, and surprisingly War Master Draven. The inclusion of Draven was controversial, but Marek insisted that the military perspective needed to be represented. The War Master had reluctantly agreed to participate in diplomatic talks, though his skepticism about human intentions remained evident. The Kale delegation departed aboard the ceremonial vessel Dawn of Understanding, a ship reserved for first contact situations with new civilizations. The irony of using a first contact vessel to meet a species they had been observing for 2 centuries was not lost on anyone involved. The two vessels approached each other in the vast emptiness between worlds. Human sensors tracked every movement of the Kale ship, while Kale instruments analyzed the Unity with intense interest. The human vessel utilized propulsion systems that appeared to bend space itself, achieving speeds that shouldn't be possible for such a young civilization. Its hull was composed of materials that the Kale scanners couldn't fully identify, suggesting advances in materials science that paralleled their own centuries-old research. Most intriguingly, the Unity's power signature indicated an energy generation system unlike anything in the Kale database. Humanity had clearly been busy during the decades the Kale thought they were watching a primitive species struggle with chemical rockets and nuclear fission. The meeting chamber was established in neutral space using portable facilities that both sides agreed upon. Admiral Chin and her team materialized first, using transportation technology that caused visible surprise among the Kale delegation when they arrived moments later. The two groups faced each other for the first time, not through telescopes or surveillance feeds but in person. High Counselor Marek studied the humans carefully, noting their calm demeanor and confident bearing. These were not the representatives of a frightened species meeting superior beings. These were equals coming to negotiate terms of coexistence. Admiral Chin stepped forward and offered a traditional human greeting, extending her hand in a gesture that Vera had documented in her cultural studies. Marek, after a moment's hesitation, accepted the handshake, and in that simple gesture, everything changed. The initial discussions were careful and measured. Admiral Chin explained that Earth had detected the Kale surveillance network 17 years ago, shortly after humanity achieved their first successful faster-than-light experiments. The discovery that they were being watched had galvanized human society in ways that the Kale couldn't have predicted. Instead of panicking or fragmenting further, humanity had united around a common purpose. The defense network, the hidden installations, the advanced technology, all of it had been developed in response to the realization that they were not alone in the universe and that someone was studying them like laboratory specimens. The tone in Chen's voice made it clear that humanity had not appreciated being observed without their knowledge or consent. High Counselor Marek acknowledged the Kale's mistake in assuming human primitiveness. He explained that the Dominion had observed thousands of civilizations and had developed protocols for guiding younger species toward peaceful integration into the galactic community. The surveillance was meant to be protective, to ensure that humans didn't destroy themselves before reaching a level of maturity that would allow for productive first contact. But Vera interjected with an observation that surprised everyone, including her fellow Kale. She noted that perhaps the Dominion's protocols were based on assumptions that didn't apply to humanity. Every other species the Kale had encountered had followed relatively predictable developmental paths. Humanity had taken a completely different approach, driven by curiosity, competition, and an apparently inexhaustible capacity for innovation under pressure. War Master Draven spoke next, his tone skeptical and challenging. He demanded to know how humanity had achieved such rapid technological advancement. The physics alone should have required centuries of research and development, yet humans had apparently compressed that timeline into mere decades. Admiral Chin smiled slightly and gestured to one of her companions, Dr. Amara Okafor, humanity's leading theoretical physicist. Dr. Okafor explained that human scientists had approached problems from angles that more established civilizations might have dismissed as impossible or impractical. Without the burden of knowing what couldn't be done, humans had experimented freely, combining ideas from quantum mechanics, theoretical physics, and even philosophy to create new frameworks for understanding reality. Some of their successes were lucky accidents, but most came from a willingness to fail repeatedly until they found solutions that worked. The revelation that humanity's technological leaps were based partly on trial and error rather than systematic development shocked the Kale delegation. Their own scientific advancement had been methodical and precise, building upon established knowledge in careful increments. The idea that a species could achieve comparable results through what amounted to educated guessing and creative problem-solving challenged their fundamental understanding of technological progress. Fleet Commander Zephan asked the question that everyone was thinking. If humans could achieve this much in less than 2 decades, what would they be capable of in another century? The implications for the galactic balance of power were staggering. Admiral Chen addressed the underlying concern directly. Humanity had no interest in conquest or expansion at the expense of other species. Earth's defense network existed solely to protect their home system and ensure their sovereignty. However, humanity also insisted on being treated as equals by any civilization they encountered. The days of being observed and studied without knowledge or consent were over. Moving forward, any relationship between humanity and the Kale Dominion would be built on mutual respect and transparent communication. Chen made it clear that Earth was willing to share knowledge and cooperate on matters of common interest, but only as partners, not as subjects or pupils. The negotiations continued for hours, with both sides exploring the parameters of a new relationship. Agreements were reached on establishing formal diplomatic channels, defining boundaries for their respective territories, and creating frameworks for scientific and cultural exchange. War Master Draven remained skeptical throughout, but even he had to acknowledge that forcing the issue militarily would be costly and potentially counterproductive. The Kale battle group could certainly inflict damage on Earth's defenses, but the humans had positioned their assets cleverly, and any assault would result in significant Kale casualties. More importantly, humanity had demonstrated that they could detect and track Kale vessels with ease, eliminating the element of surprise that typically gave the Dominion its military advantage. As the formal meetings concluded, Senior Analyst Vera requested a private conversation with Admiral Chen. The two women stepped aside, and Vera admitted something that had been troubling her since the revelations began. She acknowledged that her reports had been fundamentally flawed, based on assumptions rather than true understanding. Humanity's apparent divisions and conflicts had been real, but Vera had failed to recognize the strength that came from such diversity. Where she had seen weakness and disunity, she should have seen resilience and adaptability. Chen accepted the apology gracefully and offered her own insight. She explained that humanity's greatest advantage was their ability to hold multiple contradictory truths simultaneously. Humans could be fiercely competitive while cooperating on larger goals. They could disagree passionately while respecting their opponents. This complexity made them unpredictable, but it also made them remarkably capable of responding to unexpected challenges. The delegations returned to their respective vessels, and messages were transmitted to both Earth and the Kale Dominion's home worlds. Humanity had officially joined the galactic community, not as newcomers seeking guidance but as a recognized civilization claiming their place among the stars. The Kale Council would spend months analyzing what had happened and revising their protocols for observing developing civilizations. The humans had taught them a valuable lesson. Assumptions based on past experience could blind observers to new possibilities. In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Chen addressed her team, thanking them for their years of dedication and sacrifice. The secret was out now, and humanity's hidden defenses would soon become public knowledge. There would be questions, challenges, and difficult adjustments ahead. But Earth had successfully navigated first contact on their own terms, and that achievement would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Across Earth's solar system, Personnel at the hidden installations received the news that their mission had succeeded. Lieutenant Commander Webb and his crew celebrated quietly, knowing that their work was far from over. The defense network would remain operational, constantly upgraded and improved as humanity learned more about the galaxy they now openly inhabited. Other civilizations would hear about Earth's first contact with the Kale Dominion, and they would draw their own conclusions. Some would see humans as potential allies, others as potential threats. But all of them would understand one fundamental truth. Humanity had been ready all along, prepared not just with weapons and technology but with the will to defend themselves and the wisdom to choose peace when possible. The galaxy had underestimated them, assuming that youth meant weakness and isolation meant ignorance. They had been wrong, and the balance of power among the stars had shifted in ways that no one could have predicted. Humanity's age of cosmic childhood had ended not with a whimper but with a declaration that echoed across light years. Earth was defended, humanity was united, and they were ready for whatever challenges the vast universe would bring.